Hello and welcome back to the Wildlife Moto channel. So today we're going to do a bit of a build update on the 81 BMW R100CS. There's been loads going on since I last uploaded a video on the channel. The bike is really starting to take shape now. So we'll flip the camera around, I'll show you what I've been up to and have a little bit of a chat about what's coming up next. So where I left off in my last video, I was about to install the fork caps. They hadn't actually turned up yet, but they are now here. As you can see, looking absolutely fantastic. These are from a company called Moto CNC, and they're kind of just a nice machined finish on there, as you can see there. So these forks are now loaded up. We've got the springs in there. I have filled them with, can you just see in the back there? Let's zoom in. So liquid moly 7.5 weight oil, which is a kind of medium light, they say. So that's in there. We've got about 220 millilitres in each leg. So we're all set. Everything is looking good there. I've also installed the steering damper system as well. So that just kind of goes down through the little acorn nut here. So this one was specially drilled out for the steering damper. Just in there, it's bolted onto the bottom of the lower yoke and secured in place with two of these kind of ball sockets. So one there on this kind of rack and pinion system which connects up to the control, and then also it kind of mounts onto the back of the frame, well, the front of the frame should I say, there at the back of this shot. You go from no damping, so we're moving it like this. We should see that the damper does nothing, doesn't move at all. And then as you start dialing it in, it's actually surprising how much damping you do get on this. So we set it all the way up to its maximum setting, and then it's quite a lot. You can see just how much travel you actually do get in that damper. It comes all the way out there. That's the original damper. Just cleaned it up a little bit. Still seems to work absolutely fine, but I have to say, a little bit surprised at how much damping there is. Maybe it's just because the bars aren't on yet, but yeah, the difference between none and full damping is quite significant. I've got the lower fork brace on, so obviously the mud guard is going to sit on this. I have just installed it with on the left hand side, just put a couple of extra washers in there. So there's a washer there that sits between the fork and the bracket itself, just because I want to make sure that when I tighten this, there's no kind of tension on this. We're not pushing or pulling the forks in any particular direction. So just made sure that the gap between the bracket itself and the fork leg is fully closed off. So I was able just to slide a washer in there. So I thought that might be a good idea, rather than having the whole thing pulling out and potentially contributing to stiction on the fork sliders. But everything seems pretty smooth. We're able to move the axle nice and smoothly. I've kind of double checked all the height of the stanchions and things like that. There's a tiny little lip. You might just be able to see a little bit, you probably can't now, but there's a tiny little ring that I showed you in the previous video. It sits just under this bracket here, that these fork cap nuts are now torqued down onto. And then I've gone ahead and just fastened up all the pinch bolts. We've got a mile of cable for the blinkers. Don't know what I was thinking there, but obviously left quite a lot of leeway. Anyway, so we'll get the blinkers on there in due course. Talking of electrical stuff, lots to do around finishing up the electrics on the bike. I will be reusing the original loom, but I've gone and got brackets for the new coil system on the bike. Let me just go and grab that. So here it is. So it's a new coil system which deals with both of the sparks. So as you can see, we've got dual towers, I think they call them, and then a special bracket which will bolt it onto the frame where one of those previous massive 6-volt Bosch coils used to sit. There used to be two big 6-volt coils that sat either side of the frame. So now we just have one. So we need to do a little bit of work on this connection here so that that can hook up onto the main loom, and then that will get bolted on there, and then we'll have both of those wires there. I'm trying to do this with one hand, eventually connected to our kind of spark plug caps that will go down to either side of the engine, just like magic. So a lot of the electrical components on this bike are getting replaced. So things like this, which is the regulator, that just goes up on there. And I've also replaced all of the wiring, as you might have seen in the alternator installation video. So all of the loom that will eventually plug into this is all brand new, as is all of the wiring between the alternator and the diode board as well. So that's all been replaced. Some of the wiring, like this one, this is the battery plus cable, which connects to the starter motor. That's the original cable. The main loom is going to stay original, just because I think it's kind of okay. I think it's in good condition, but we'll see. It's about 250 odd quid if you want to replace the main loom, so fingers crossed it's okay. Finally, with the electrics, I will be installing a little bit of modern technology on this bike in the form of this. This is the SysApp tracking device. The guys at SysApp sent me this to try it out. Once it's up and running, I'll take you through all the features in terms of how this works. And it's just another little layer of protection. If your bike does go missing, at least you might stand a fighting chance of getting the thing back. Okay, so over at the back of the bike, I have installed the swing arm. And as you can see here, it's currently just hanging out on an axle stand at the moment, ready to get hung up on the suspension and things like that when we get to that point. So I'm going to have to put the subframe on to do that. So I'm going to have to put the final drive on, and then I can go ahead and install the brand new Hagen Nitro shocks that are currently sat over there. Installing the swing arm on these bikes is quite fun. You've got those two pivots that go in either side here. You've got to be a little bit careful here with this gap, because you want to make sure that it's absolutely equal on both sides. So in my particular case, the gap measures about 3.9 millimeters on either side. So we're pretty much bang on. But it did take a little bit of finessing to get it to that point. So the first thing you do is just insert the pivot pins on both sides, torque them up a little bit, try to get that gap set, torque them up to about 15, I think I did pounds-foot, about 15 pounds-foot, then back them off, then go back to about 7.5, and then go ahead and put the lock nuts in and tighten those to 75 pounds-foot on both sides. And once you're done, the swing arm should be nice and central and get a nice smooth movement on the bearings there. And I did just put a load of protection on the swing arm as I was installing it, because it kind of comes up pretty close against this bracket here. So obviously as you're maneuvering it and fitting it in place, you've got to be careful that you don't guff up all your beautiful new powder coat, which thankfully I didn't do. So that's all done. You can't see them at the moment, but I'll cut into some footage. So the exhaust brackets here that sit on the bottom of the little arms here that come off the back of the frame, they were all completely threaded and stripped, so I had to go ahead and drill those out and put in a V-coil in there. The V-coil is basically just like a helicoil, isn't it? Yeah, that's the one. So they're just another brand name for those. Really nice kit, made in Germany. Great stuff. So yeah, happy with how all that went, thankfully. So we've now got some good threads back in there. Now under here, you might also be able to see that we've got the center stand in place. There it is. But I've got a bit of a problem. It's only a small problem, but I've got a little bit of a problem with my center stand that I want to investigate a little bit further. You can see this pivot bush here, which is bolted to the frame via this big M10 bolt. It's a countersunk bolt that runs through the back of the frame, through the center stand, and then is bolted in place by this locking nut here, or nylock nut here. My only small issue with it is it protrudes quite far out from the frame once the center stand is in place. Now, the measurement on this bushing is 13.5 millimeters, and we've got this little extra bit of space here, which means that we don't actually get any play, but there's just a little bit of a gap there that I'm not entirely happy about. The reason I'm not happy about it is, you can imagine, in the worst case scenario, could the center stand move over and then essentially kind of move off of its little catch that effectively holds the bike up? I don't think it's possible, but it's just more play than I'd like in there. Now, it turns out that BMW also make 11mm versions of these. So I've been in touch with Motorworks, and they are sourcing me a couple of 11mm versions, which should just close off that gap, meaning that the top bit of the center stand will be kind of nicely butted up against this top hat flange, if you like, on the outer edge of the bushing, and hopefully will just be a little bit more secure in there. I don't know if I'm just making a fuss over nothing, but it's definitely worth making sure that we're not going to come crashing down off the sensor stand. So elsewhere, I've also got the Surefoot side stand now installed. So this was also sent off and powder coated, and it bolts onto the bike via the, you can see it's covered in tape there to remind me it's not torqued up, but that's the rear engine mounting stud. So it kind of clips on there, and then there's a little, what would you call that? A little bracket that kind of sweeps over the frame and secures it in place. So quite simple assembly. The only thing I had a bit of a nightmare with was getting this bolt. So this again is another countersunk bolt that runs through the clevis on the side stand. As you can see, you see it under there. Let's get it to focus. So that's the top bit of the bolt, and it kind of runs up through this clevis here. Originally, I used a 35mm bolt, which meant that I wouldn't have to use a nut on the top there. The problem with that is, as you tighten it up, it starts to kind of really pinch the clevis closed, so that you can't operate the stand, which is no good. So you do need that bolt to be long enough to come through so that you can attach a nut to the top, and then you've got that clamping force coming down from the top rather than kind of pinching it together, if you know what I mean. The only thing you need to be really careful of is I had to get a 40mm bolt, which is the next size up from 35 for an M10 countersunk. But a 40mm bolt is just a little bit too tall to clear that spring as it sweeps over like that. So I had to do a couple of things. The first thing was just to file it back a little bit. So it's just probably about 38mm now, just short enough to clear the spring. And the only kind of nut that I could get on there with my washers underneath was one half of a jam nut, which is a 5mm nut, which is just perfect to clear the little arm on the spring there. So that's all in place and done. But yeah, if you're doing that, I mean, the reason is I took everything apart and chucked away the old nut and bolt when it was getting powder coated, which was a little bit silly because I kind of had to fashion up a new system to make it work and make sure it clears that spring. But yeah, a little bit of filing and it's all good. So the other thing to talk about is the petrol tank on this bike. Now that's been undergoing a little bit of electrolysis just to remove some of the surface rust that had built up in the tank. So I've had that running for about a week or so, flushed out plenty of disgustingly rusty water, destroyed a sacrificial anode or two, but the inside of that tank is looking really good now. That's currently sat at home actually. I've managed to get that past the wife to keep it warm so that it doesn't rust in this cold, damp garage. And what I've also done is I've just sprayed the inside of it with a little bit of this stuff, a little bit of fogging oil, just to make sure that we're keeping any kind of surface rust at bay in the interim between doing all the rest of the work on the bike and, you know, getting it back in the garage and brimmed up with petrol so that we can keep the inside clear of any corrosion. So that's been happening as well. And I think that's probably about it. The next steps to get done on the bike, so this obviously is the final drive, which I need to get fitted back onto the rear of the swing arm, so that's the next thing to do. But before I do that, I also need to go ahead and put all the new kind of braking internals in here. So I believe they kind of go something like that. Yeah, almost exactly like that. Not. And then we've got this little cam that goes through here, so that's our kind of actuator that will push through. And we've got our springs here. These are the original springs. I think they should be fine, but we'll see. So yeah, they kind of just go in something like that, and then you've got the cam actuator which opens and closes them. So that will be a little bit of wrestling to get that all installed. We've got new nuts that go on these studs here as we attach it to the swing arm. This is the brake lever that's all been freshly vapor blasted, so that's all good to go. And yeah, all the other kind of little bits and pieces in there. And then we've got I think this is it, isn't it? Yeah, that's the adjuster arm there that we'll eventually get in place to finish that assembly for the braking system. Elsewhere, I mean, all the usual stuff. I'm debating, actually. Tell me what you think about this, right? So now that our top yoke assembly is looking so blimmin' gorgeous, do we go ahead and cover it all up with this thing? What do we do? When we put our new bars on there, which have also been chromed and look absolutely fantastic, do we go and cover up all of that beauty with a big old crash bar thing, crash pad, whatever they call it? Don't know. Actually, this is a replacement unit. It's a second-hand part, but the part that I had, these clamps here had been ripped off a long time ago, and somebody had just kind of drilled a hole in it and zip tied it onto the bars. So I've invested 25 quid this cost me, but I just don't know whether I can bear to cover up all of that good stuff. These are the Goodrich brake lines I mentioned briefly in a previous video, so they're all ready to go. Looking fantastic. So new braided brake lines, got a full set of Ven Hill cables to go on there as well, so new throttle cables, and well, actually these are all just throttle cables. So yeah, all good to go, all good to go. There was one other thing that I was thinking about doing on this bike, and I don't think I'm going to do it at the moment, but I was considering going for the older style of airbox, which would be quite a big pain, to be completely honest, especially as I've just spent all the money getting all this Cerakoted and looking beautiful. But I do like that old aluminium kind of clamshell style airbox that originally sat on top of the transmission before BMW moved to this. I mean, it is a metal box, but then it has the plastic air filter that sits on top there, and then it has these big intakes that sit on top here. They won't fit until we get the airbox, the filter in there, but they kind of sit on top there like that. So it's a little bit plastic fantastic, but you don't really see that because it's under the petrol tank. This is a new set of airbox clips in stainless steel to replace the old ones that were looking a little bit tired. But so yeah, I mean, I've kind of, yeah, I think I've just about talked myself out of it, because it would be quite a pain to go down that road, because it also involves changing the starter motor cover as well. So I'd need to basically decommission this, decommission the airbox, get a new airbox, get a new starter motor cover, get a new air filter. You have to change some of the plumbing between the filter and the airbox and the carburetors as well. So it's a little bit of a faff, but it would give it a bit more of a classic look. Maybe it's a project for the future. Anyway, stop it, let's just get the thing built. I think that's probably the best course of action. So that's where we're currently at. It's pretty exciting to see everything finally coming together. It's been a long time in the making. There's been so much work that's kind of gone into all the individual component parts. It's just fantastic to see things starting to get back onto the bike and starting to all kind of come together and make sense as we start to get towards the final third really of this project. And we're not really all that far away from, you know, sticking a bit of oil in the engine, putting the key in there and seeing if this thing actually starts up. Can you imagine if it didn't? I don't even want to think about that. It would be fine. It would be fine. So yeah, we're not far away from that. There's still plenty to do in the meantime. So thank you very much for watching. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you want to follow this build. That way you'll get notified when the new videos drop. Anyway, that's it for now. Until the next one, ride safe.